balls and 1 strike. Fastball in the outside corner. Strike 2. Taking time on the mound now, has the sign and winds up. And the 2-2 pitch, a curveball.
Welcome to the BBA Today, your podcast that covers events around the Brewster Baseball Association every day with your host, Yellow Springs 9 General Manager, Ron Collins. And now, let's get on with the show.
All right, and thank you so much. We are up to episode 11 of the BBA Today, 11, lucky 11. And today we are lucky to have with me Mike Simon, not Mike Shannon, Mike Simon, the gentleman that everyone I think knows and loves today is kind of the BBA's chief exterior designer, graphical art guy. Has recently put together a whole process where he's doing Makeover Mondays to talk about people's logos and whatnot. Mike Simon, thank you so much for spending part of your afternoon, evening with us here today.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be on.
What we're going to do here is a second edition of, what is it, your random graph of the week, which of course anything that has graph in it immediately has my attention. So
exactly.
You put together an extra viz today on BBA Ironman and games played, and I thought it would be fantastic to actually do a video rather than a podcast. And hopefully people can follow through with us even just on audio if they want. But I'd love you to walk us through this viz and talk to us about how you put it together.
Sure. One of the things that it's every week is trying to think of something new to do as far as it's different or out there. I apologize for the dog barking in the background. How dare someone walk in front of the house?
It's not a BBA podcast if we don't have either an intrusion by a robot, a dog, or a wife.
So one of the things I was kind of looking at is I was kind of going through and noticing that as for BBAs, as far and their OTP, as far as the game itself, like streaks, things that it tracks and records, is the one thing that it doesn't do is a consecutive games played streak. So I was just kind of thinking about where we've had all these conversations and talks about where other different stats and things for players, around the league, we tend to give these imaginary players life, which is one of the things that I find myself delving into way too much. But like, who would equivalently be like our Iron Man? Who's really kind of played the most consecutive games in a row? So that's where I was really trying to figure out and find out. So I poked off some of the guys at OTP, Alex and a couple of the guys, and asked them, is this something that the program does track? And it doesn't, as far as from a streak goes. So with that, I kind of had to go back through and kind of delve through the data. And one of the things that I came up with is there are actually ways to go out and do that. So in this viz here, I really tried to figure out who's kind of played the most consecutive games in the BBA. So the first thing I really kind of did is kind of went through and really narrowed it down to the top 10. Sorry, the top 20. So if you look at as far as from a top 20 games played overall in the BBA, that's kind of what the graph is, or the chart is kind of over here on your left-hand side. You kind of hover over it. And again, I apologize if people are watching this on a small screen. But one of the things, as far as from a Tableau or from a visual perspective, if you kind of hover over a mouse over, I've kind of put some additional information in there. So Frank Thomas III, from a career-wise, he has played the most games in the BBA at 3,113. So he's his last season in the BBA was 2035. Played 19 years, and he is in the Hall of Fame. So that's kind of, we're also on this viz as well, and some of the other ones. A lot of it is viz, kind of more visual. So the eye and the brain kind of can determine as far as look at or judge some responses based off of really what's kind of shown on the screen. So that's why orange indicates Hall of Fame if you kind of mouse over that, but even kind of make it very, very simple in that sense. So if you look down, Frank Thomas is number one as far as the top 20, and I've kind of listed it that way. So my next thing is, okay, well, of those guys that are in the top 20, I kind of went back through and I had to do make some determinations on, of those guys, how many of those seasons that he played, those 19 seasons, did he play 162 games? So if you look at it, yes, Frank Thomas did play. He tops the BBA as far as he's had, of his 19 years, he's had 10 seasons of 162 games played. So it seems kind of that point where if you look at it at a top level, it kind of looks like, yeah, hey, this guy would be your Iron Man because he's played the most games and he's had the most 162 game seasons. But kind of delving down into the more of the details, you kind of look at it.
Well, yeah, I think ultimately, if you go back over Frank Thomas the third there, real quick, and over in the top 20 162 games played, one of the things I like about this, and I'm kind of just digging into it a bit myself here, is that seasons, tell me if this is where you're going to be going, right? Because that seasons, the player started 162 games, 2018, 2019, but then you've got a 4-year gap to 2023. So I'm going to guess that is where the problem comes.
Exactly. So he's had the most, but it's not really consecutive. So that's where we kind of go back and look down. And then if you look at the next two on the list, even you look at like, so Bo Jordan, who's also has 9, as well as John Mick, he's played 9 consecutive, or have 9 years of 162 games. But again, he's broken up as well too. If you kind of go down and look, there are some actually 2024. He actually stops.
Bo Jordan is a Superman, and so he should be given special dispensation for that year. Mm-hmm. I have to say that, right, because he's my team owner, you know.
which kind of brings us to John Mick, right? So he's also got 9 years, but if you look at him, he's had 9 consecutive years from 2030 all the way to 2038 of 162 games in a season. He's also averaged and again, he's only been on 12 years, because if you scroll down and you look, he's way down here at the bottom as far as he's actually, was he 18th? He's 18th out of the top 20 as far as total games played. So he's only played 2,031 games in his BBA career. He's still active. So he's only got, as compared to Frank Thomas's 19, he's only got 12 years. But in those 12 years, he's had 9 straight consecutive years. He had 9 years of 162 games played. In that span is actually, of these 2,031 games, he's averaged 156 games per season. If you go back up to Thomas III, he's only averaged in those 19 years 131 games per season. Is that something to where he's kind of lasted longer towards the end of his career? He's kind of trailed off and hasn't played a lot of games. It's possible, but it kind of lends to the conversation. Mm-hmm. But again, going to Mick, you kind of look at him, where he's played consecutive those 9 seasons in a row of 162 games. And then we kind of went back and we looked at it to where the one season that his streak did break, right? He only missed 1 game. So I kind of noticed that up on top, where, again, John Porky Mick, 12-year vet at the BBA, again, sits at 18 as far as overall in the top 20 games started. But in those 12 seasons, he's racked up 9 consecutive years of 162 games. And again, he only missed 10 straight seasons of 162 games in 2039 by 1 game, right? So if you kind of add that in, as we look at it, his consecutive game streak is 1,573 games consecutively played. So again, he only missed 10 years of playing 162 games by 1 game, right? And kind of that we've kind of, yeah,
and that's interesting, because I know when you were beginning to put this together, you asked about. I was able to find that 1 game because it was in 2039,
2039,
38, 39. Yep. So he played like 114 consecutive or 113 consecutive games that year.
Yeah, and missed 1 game.
I have to see if I can figure out why he missed that 1 game.
It must have been some, his wife gave birth. I don't know. As far as I'd be curious to see what or why, he kind of missed that game. So
it probably had something to do with Kate.
Yeah.
We'll just leave it at that.
I
Cater
mean,
case
that's
cookies,
and
right?
then and if you kind of scroll down again at the bottom, as far as if you look at it, as far as the some donut graphs on the bottom, as far as the percentage of games started by of the top 20 players by position, it seems really first base. I mean, your first basemen tend to make up the majority, almost half of the your top 20 position players. First basemen are in the make up half, almost about half of the those position players. What kind of shocked me was really interesting, is I would think some of the other ones, but the fact that catchers make up 5% of the top 20 players, which I would not think that games played would be done by of your top 20 would a catcher would be in there, as opposed to, I think we don't have any left fielders, right? So there are no left fielders that make up the top 20 games played in the BBA.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think it's not surprising that first basemen are the most durable. I would have guessed that anyway. But then you also look at Frank Thomas at the top there. He's got is it 360 or something like that game gap on overall games played. Frank Thomas III was effectively a career DH, so that's even more interesting, right? But he was also Frank Thomas
You've got
III, which not
so
too
if you
many
look,
not too many players are Frank Thomas III.
So if I kind of scroll down here and I look as far as who's, because I've got, again, so looks like, again, so the highest active player based off of the end of last year's data looks to be Dusty Rose, right? So he's the highest next up on the list.
Yeah.
So
Actually,
again, based off the season,
you're gonna need to color in Mario Soriano on the Hall of Fame too, because he's the newest. He's the newest guy in. So
right. Okay. Yeah. So again, this is kind of based off of last year's data. So
right.
So I mean, next year when I update this, he will become orange.
Right. We just haven't updated all the data set, so that's nothing that you
Right.
missed.
Yeah, so it's really, it's kind of basically there's a point in time where I have to close it, and it's pretty much the end of the season as far as where I get the data, unless I can
Right.
I can grab it from you for some of the in-game stuff. So
Yeah.
this
Well,
is kind of the latest one. Again, it's what.
talk me a little bit about you have to pull data from places and so forth. I mean, how do you decide on topics to do these visuals on? It's always interesting to see what you're doing. So how do you decide? I mean, is it just something that strikes you, or do you have a series of things that you're looking at, or?
A lot of them too sometimes come from like one of the first ones that I've done. Was really kind of listening to some of the podcasts and things that other people do around the BBA. Niles has been one where I think one of the first ones that I did was the Niles Hall of Fame, right? So we're really who qualifies or who gets in there. So that was kind of, my muse or my inspiration as far as, what's, how can I visualize something like that? So I took a shot at that. Some of the other ones that we talked about were ticket prices. Revenue generating, what podcasts or some conversations are on the about how is that impacted my gate, my revenue, my attendance. So that was one of the other ones that I had done, to where if I look at that, which I do have to update, is so it's this one right here. Same thing too, where it's kind of a visual, there's the numbers and the kind of the spreadsheet, and this is kind of the way where we've kind of looked at where this is kind of gives you a visual representation of, you can kind of see year over year where, what the price of my ticket is, how it's impacted my attendance, how it's impacted my gate revenue. And
I think that's a fantastic graphic right there. It's one of those things that you have to stare at for a solid minute or two and kind of let your brain flow over the years. But once you kind of get into the frame of reference on it, then graphically you can just immediately see what your team has done, right?
And where's that sweet spot, right? So it's kind of the point where like every owner can kind of go up there and take a look and see what the information is and where, and again, it's really kind of meant to start the conversation, meant to, start some talk about it. But that's really, I mean, kind of,
how did you come about
finding,
how did you find Tableau? What is it that, is that something you use for work, or how did you get into doing this at all?
It was partially through work, so there was some stuff that I had to do through work, but something like this, as far as just um, this kind of just like business analytics, data intelligence, those type of things, sort of interest me. It's kind of what my primary focus of my job, but it's kind of what it started this is kind of an interesting area of opportunity, and so I started to kind of go down it. And one of the things and I just kind of self-taught myself to where I'm like, all right, so one of the things that they talked about is to be able to help learn the product, kind of like myself, is to where you reverse engineer things, but do something that you're passionate about from using, business analytics or data intelligence. Well, the BBAs, with stats and baseball, it's the perfect, it's the perfect marriage, right? So to joining the BBA and kind of using this, I mean, it's been interesting because the fact that now, because I've learned this product, using the BBA, it's actually presented, or resulted in tremendous results at work, as far as from use this for other things in the company, as far as to be able to create dashboards and things like that for management, but basically using kind of what I've learned here, and I pretty much learned it by reverse engineering some of the stuff that I've seen on people's other people's sites and examples.
Yeah, that was always
Yeah.
the argument that I used with when I was working full time, when I was using, what is it, MATLAB, and there was another statistical program. I needed to do some trials with something in order to learn how to use the statistical programming. So I would always bring my baseball information in. That was my argument anyway, and most people bought it.
You're passionate about it, and you're interested in it. It actually makes you're not it's fun. It's not something arduous that you're like it's fun to kind of to learn it that way. But yeah.
So what does the process consist of when it comes to Tableau? I know obviously you need to throw a bunch of data in. Do you just like upload a bunch of Excel sheets and then play with it, or?
Yeah, so I mean, as far it takes I could read SQL databases, access CSVs, text files, PDFs, Excel files. It's got a multiple version of it, and that's where I've actually done to where my company's been generous enough, as far as the stuff that I've produced them, that I've showed them the BBA site, as far as, look, this is what I could do with the tool. And there's kind of two versions of it. There's the free public version, which is what I'm using here for the BBA, and then there's the full-blown version that you have to pay for. So at the point where like work's been like, here you go, we'll pay for a license for you, knock your socks off, run with it. So that's been
cool. So basically,
so
anyone in the league who wanted to could just get in and get a free, use the free service and just play with it themselves, is what you're basically saying right there.
Yep, 100%. Yep, it's really, and the only thing with the free service and the pay for service is that any data that you publish is so. Again, that's why you don't want to use that for a commercial or business product where if you've got some sort of proprietary data, you don't want that published. But really, the community and whatever, where I've kind of tried to do some things and done some things where I've posted stuff online to the forums, and within less than 24 hours, somebody's come back and said, "Oh, okay, do X, Y, and Z. This should fix what you're looking for," or I've tried this. So it's been a very welcome and opening community. So yeah, really anybody who wants to do this, again, so even point where you've got like Stats Plus, if you want to pull down and export anything out of Stats Plus from a CSV file, you can take that and you can ingest that back up into Tableau and
very cool.
Kind of just visualize the data. Yep.
Alrighty. Well, this is fantastic. I appreciate you walking us through the latest viz and some information on the background of it. We'll have to try to do this again on another one of your excellent representations. I appreciate your time here, Mike.
Oh, no problem. It's been fun, Ron.
You've been listening to the BBA Today, a podcast that covers the Brewster Baseball Association every day. Music is Bold Statement, available at BesleyanStudios.com and use link attribution. Be safe and well, and we will hear you again tomorrow.